a look at how to do the short rows to make the stockinette stitch strips. So you can see here I have a strip of stockinette stitch around the shaped center. And it's not stretchy enough like the garter stitch is to just knit it straight and pull it around. So we have to make it curve. And we do that by making the outside of the strip longer than the inside of the strip. And that's done by knitting short rows. And you can see here where I had my short rows, because they make a little textural blip. It's not noticeable in a whole rug very much, but you can see it if you look close. So what I did in these sections is I knit rows that just went like that. So I added more rows out here than I did to the inside. So let's look at how to do that. Here's a little sample that I have where I've started to make short rows, and you can see the right edge here is longer than the left edge, and I've done some rows where I don't go all the way across. So these are marked with these yarns that I did with the wrap and turn technique, and I'm going to show you that technique as well as my new favorite, the German double stitch technique. But what I've done here is I've knit all the way across to the second to last stitch, then I wrapped it, and then I just knit back, and then I did that again here to the fourth to last stitch and knit back, and then to the sixth to last stitch. So in this case I'm doing it every other row, and depending on how close you put these together and how many you do, this side will grow more, and eventually it will form a curve because this can't keep going straight longer because it's attached to the short side. So eventually it will pull it and force it to curve around. So let me show you how I did that. So we'll do a wrap and turn first. So I'm going to knit up to the stitch where my pattern says, or where I want to stop knitting for the short row. And in this case, since I've been doing it every other, I'm going to go ahead and do it again. Now, before I turn, with the wrap and turn, you do the special thing before you turn. And the reason you're doing this is because if you just turn, it will make a hole. So we want to get some extra yarn where it would make a hole. So when we come back later, that extra yarn would fill up the gap. So what I do is before I turn, I'm going to wrap this stitch. So I slide it over to my right needle, and you can see I just slipped it purlwise. Then my yarn's in the back, so I bring it to the front, put the stitch back on the other side, and then I bring my yarn around to the back again between the needles. And see how that yarn is getting wrapped around that stitch? That's why it's called wrap and turn. So now that I've wrapped, I go ahead and turn, and I'm on the purl row. And so my yarn's in the front. If it wasn't, I would just bring it in the front, but it is because we're doing stockinette stitch, and the wrap and turn ends up in the front. And I just finished that row, which is a short row. I only had 4 stitches. And then there you go. You can see I've added one more row just over here. So now I'll show you my new favorite technique, which is the German double stitch, and then we'll come back and we'll knit across and get rid of these blips. Okay, so German double stitch, you knit the stitch where you're going to turn. On the wrap and turn, I would wrap it and then turn. On the German double stitch, I'm going to knit it and then turn. And now I'm going to make this stitch into a German double stitch. So how do I do that? I slide it onto this needle, and then I pull my working yarn up over the top. So see, it was 1 stitch, and I pull it up really tight over the top so the 2 legs of the stitch come over the needle, and that creates the double stitch. Now I have to bring my yarn to the front because I'm going to purl, and then I purl and give a little tightness tug on the first stitch to lock that double stitch. Okay, so see where I have those 2? Here you can see the wrap that goes around the wrapped stitch. With the German double stitch, what happens is you get 2 stitches that are a pair. Okay, so you can see how it looks different. Here we have the blip from the wrap, and here we have the 2 legs of the stitch. So what happens later, eventually you have to start knitting across all those stitches again. And what happens is we're going to knit the 2 together. Here we have the 2 strands of the double stitch that we're going to knit together as 1 stitch. And here we have the wrap and the stitch that we're going to knit together as 1 stitch. So I'm just going to be knitting this row, and then I get to this, and I'm going to go into both of those strands to make my knit, kind of like I'm knitting two together. And then I've wrapped it around with two strands. And now I continue across, and when I get, if I did the short row technique with the wrap and turns, I have to put my needle into two strands as well, but one is down here and then the stitch. So I knit them together like that. Now some people find it a little easier to lift that and get it up onto the needle, but I just go into it and then into them together. If you have trouble knitting in pulling your yarn through it like that, you can go into them and then put your left needle in, so your left needle's in both of them. Let me show you again how I do it. I don't bother with the left needle thing. I just go into that, and then I pull my working yarn through. So you can see that as I've gone across, those blips have gotten worked into the fabric of the knitting. Now, if you look back at our sample, sometimes they leave a little bit of a textural mark, but that's okay. So those are the two techniques that I think work well for short rows for knitting rows.